Thank you all for joining yet another Impact webinar, our continuing series, and our last one for 2022. And today's webinar is very, very special to us. It focuses on addiction prevention and recovery. I'm Kevin Hilton, the CEO of Impact, and today we have two guests, Aaron Sinclair of DeNovo Treatment Centers and Rob Timbulak of Ironworkers Local 700 Windsor, Ontario. And let me do a quick introduction. Aaron Sinclair is the Executive Director of DeNovo Treatment Center located in Huntsville, Ontario. He's been working in addiction and mental health for over 16 years, residential treatment as well as private practice. Aaron's a registered psychotherapist through the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario and holds the designations International Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor and Canadian Clinical Supervisor with the Canadian Addiction Counselor Certification Federation. And also with us is Rob Timbulak of Local 700 Windsor, Ontario, who's a foreman. Right now, Rob is working on the Gordie Howe Bridge. We all know Gordie is the greatest hockey player of all time. He cherished his time with the Detroit Red Wings. He played with other clubs, but had the pleasure of walking that job and meeting both Aaron and Rob last summer, and their story is super powerful. Now, before I turn it over to Rob and Aaron, I just want to go through some quick housekeeping here. We monitor the Q&A box. So down at the middle of your screen to the right, there's Q&A. We want you to ask questions. You can ask them throughout the webinar. We will get to them. We'll get to all of them. Even if we run out of time, we'll make sure that your question gets forwarded and responded to. I'd be remiss if I didn't invite everybody on here to join us in New Orleans, Louisiana, February 12th through the 15th for the Impact Conference, annual conference, where we're going to talk about collaboration and success. We'll have the best iron workers there. We'll have the best contractors there. We'll have some of our valued customers and everybody in between. But you spend your time there, it'll be valuable time. It's truly the premier industry event. And the last 10 minutes we'll devote to Q&A. But again, you can ask those questions anywhere throughout. So with that, let me get out of the way. I'm going to turn it over to Rob to tell his story of recovery. Rob?
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is Rob. I'm an addict. Today, I'm an addict who's living clean and sober in recovery for nearly 7 years now. Just to get started, I like to start my story, my experience, strength, and hope by shedding some light on what addiction, the definition of addiction, how it was presented to me in my early days in recovery. This definition hit me hard in the heart. It really struck true for me, and it's something that I had to hear in order to even begin this to understand my addiction and in order to move into the direction of recovery. So addiction is a compulsive physical and psychological dependence on habit-forming substances such as drugs or alcohol. Addiction can also be activities such as gambling, video games, eating, sex, working, sports, etc. The addicted person keeps doing these substances or activities despite negative consequences. So that was kind of the story of my life, even prior to picking up the first, my first drink or drug. I probably had some behaviors, compulsive, addictive behaviors, sports, and things of that nature. Growing up, even before my teenage years, and experimenting with substances. I find it also beneficial to talk at the beginning a little bit about the characteristics of addiction, because again, I was oblivious to this before going to the DeNovo Treatment Center and starting this new way of life in recovery. And a few of them that really stand out for me that I can look back on. Again, I'm talking to you in this perspective of somebody who's been to recovery, giving you some context on, how I lived through my years of addiction and in recovery, and how I see them sitting where I am today, right now. So the characteristics of addiction, and this really helped me see it for myself, but I think it really helps, the family members, or the loved ones, or those who know the addicted person, and helps explain a thing or two. So addiction characteristics are denial. It's disguising. It can kind of disguise, things that are untrue into being truths. It's manipulating. It's defensiveness. It's impulsiveness and compulsiveness. It's manipulating. It's always very self-serving, self-sufficient. It's isolating. And the addicted person, at least for me, and a lot of the ones that I've met, are very good at justifying, minimizing, and rationalizing everything in their life. And it just creates this inability to take responsibility for behaviors and actions. So in saying that, sometimes I wonder why I share my story. So my purpose in sharing my story is I've heard people share before me early in my recovery, and I could see myself in their story, myself growing up, as a young boy, myself using through my teenage years, my high school years, and into my working years and into the trades. And as well as it gave me a lot of hope, seeing how they changed their lives around and they're living a life without using substances on an everyday basis. So what I hope to do is just go through my story. And what I hope to touch on is some of the warning signs I missed. And I like to hopefully I'll give somebody who maybe is wondering if they're struggling with addiction, or if one of their loved ones are struggling with addiction, hopefully a little bit of hope that there is a way out, and there is recovery is possible. So the only way I know how to do this best is to kind of go through my years of life growing up. And whatever comes out today is what comes out today. I really have to stay in the present moment and stay spontaneous, to be authentic and to be vulnerable, and just tell it how it was. So to start, I'd like to start with some of the points that I'll touch base on today. Is some of the PowerPoints will be like my seemingly normal life, my early years of using, the warning signs, the slippery slope and playing with fire through my using years, hitting bottom, which had to happen for me to find recovery. And then I'll move into a little bit of the recovery portion, de novo, which its meaning is a new beginning, which is really what it was, getting to that treatment center. A little bit about how it worked for me getting clean, and how it works staying clean, because they really are two different things. Getting clean has to come first, but staying clean takes an everyday awareness to keep it going. And then living the good life and helping others, being able to take my mess and turn it into a message of hope and recovery for others is really the whole purpose and why I'm here today sharing with you. So thank you all for being here, and I'll get started. I find it important to start a little bit, just to tell a little bit about my growing up life. I grew up in a small town of LaSalle, with my parents and my sister and my grandfather, and my grandparents were in my life, and everything seemed really normal in my life growing up. We had a lot of family around us. There was always a lot of parties, but what was happening, and I didn't know it at the time, this comes from a person in recovery and looking back over their lives. There was a lot of secrecy in my family. There was a lot of sweeping things under the rug. Every visitor that came over, every place we went, there was always alcohol involved, at least alcohol. Growing up, there was a little bit of criminal activity. There was a little bit of unfaithfulness, and I just wasn't learning any really healthy coping mechanisms. There wasn't a lot of talking in my house. So I learned the survival pattern, or the belief that I learned how to normalize everything, maybe things that weren't even so normal. So taking that into context, I played a lot of sports. I threw myself into sports and friends, and I had a really good child life, and even my early teens growing up, as far as I was concerned, as far as it looked for me. But one behavior pattern that I did pick up was just to normalize everything. I think that helped carry me through a lot of my addicted years, just normalizing things and not knowing how to talk things through. So in saying that, I started using, experimenting with alcohol and maybe tobacco pretty early, probably the summer of grade 8 going into grade 9. And by the ninth grade, like the high school years, I did a lot of the sports, the hockey, the baseball, the track, the wrestling, the cross country. I don't think I finished any of those seasons in the ninth grade, because what happened was I found drinking, and I found friends from other school districts. High school is a bigger place. There's bigger, more fish in the pond, and it became kind of like a party life started happening, and it just felt really easy. And I figured I was just doing what everyone else around me was doing, and going through high school and trying something new. Little did I know I wouldn't play organized sports for a long time. So what I started doing, without really even knowing it, again, characteristic of addiction is disguising, as I started trading time that I had playing sports. Gave me like a natural high, a natural connection, kind of made me feel good from the inside out. And I started trading it with drinking and partying and girlfriends. And it wasn't long till the 10th grade I had a car, and the partying just rapidly continued for me. Which might be a missed warning sign. However, I did surround myself mostly around people who were a lot like me. Everything I started doing, I started using almost immediately, like daily. It was weekends for a while, but then it was a couple days during the week. And before long, by the 11th and 12th grade, like I was an everyday pot smoker and drinker. Now we're taking psychedelics. Another warning sign maybe that I would have missed looking back would be, and really, I'll do all this stuff in all areas of my life. Like school didn't stop me, driving didn't stop me, my first couple jobs didn't stop me. What did start happening, another warning signs, I started skipping out on school. I started finding people who had a larger supply where I could grab more than I needed and hook my friends up. And this would, I told myself this was to make money, but what it really was, if I look back at it, was kind of to create this endless supply that I could use every day without running out. So that brought me up until I started getting some of the trouble going to school, and by this time divorce had happened, a pretty messy divorce in my family. Again, no real talking. Some things happened where I found out, my father wasn't my father. Again, I just swept this stuff under the rug, which is another warning sign. Like I just didn't let anything bother me. I thought I could just let it go in my mind, and that was how you figured things out, and nothing was going to stop me from moving forward, right? So through my 20s, the drugs started to change. If I look back, what happened was, smoking marijuana every day, and the LSD and the hallucinogens kind of started to phase out, and I know I was fortunate enough that my grandfather seen like the next phase of my life started. High school was done. My grandfather noticed that it was time to get a job. By now I was living with my grandparents. So my grandfather, it was a great thing, getting me into the ironworkers. However, what that did was open up like a bigger pond with more fish, with more of a supply of drugs and alcohol, more people to use with that used like me. And what also was happening without me really knowing it was, I met my wife. I started a family. So there's like the sides of two coins happening through my 20s, where there's a lot of good happening. I started a new career. I was pretty good at ironworking. I was progressing nicely, going to school. By finished my apprenticeship in a few years. You know, moving through my 20s, my wife and I buy a house. Surely, you know, someone owning a house, starting a family, progressing, you know, becoming a journeyman, it isn't using, you know, is not an addict. Like the belief system I had of an addict was, you know, how I was my last 2 or 3 years using, which is kind of mind-boggling that I made it that far. So through my 20s, I felt pretty invincible, but the drugs did change. You know, now I was introduced to Percocets. You know, coming to work, Percocets and cocaine were introduced. You know, and I'd like to use the drugs I was doing and the booze I was doing and how it was progressing through, you know, the 20s and 30s up until recovery in the 40s, because it just really just show how I just normalized everything and missed warning signs. And my hope is, you know, somebody else who might be living this this lifestyle can see these warning signs and maybe, you know, make an admission that I couldn't make, and that's that I needed help and I had a problem. But now I'm not smoking the marijuana anymore, and I'm not doing the hallucinants, but I am doing the cocaine and the Percocets, and that turned into oxys, you know, through my 20s. But again, now I'm coaching my kids in hockey and baseball, and I'm a good coach. And now I'm starting to run jobs, and you know, and I'm a good iron worker, you know, and I'm probably the thing that suffered the most was, you know, I wasn't a very good husband. I wasn't a very good partner. I was putting things, you know, my partner lasts a lot. And for me, I still have, you know, my wife's with me today. I met her when she was 18 years old, and we're still together. However, it wasn't with lots of warning signs and lots of pain and negative consequences that were going on. So I make it through my 20s. Everything seems to be going well. I blew some shifts along the way, sure, but I could always justify and minimize and rationalize. And there was so much work, and there were so many people in the trades, plus the friends I still had from high school who just used on a daily basis. It didn't matter if we were at work, if we were driving, if we were at a party. Kind of all just became more of a lifestyle than you know, going out on a Saturday night or maybe a Thursday night after work, and enjoying each other's social time as kind of like a you know, it didn't matter if, you know, it didn't matter what day it was anymore or what hour of the day it was. So the drugs progressed, some of the negative consequences started to progress. I did lose some jobs along the way. However, again, you would just get laid off. You know, when you work in the trades and there's many contractors to work for and there's plenty of work, you don't feel the blunt of, you know, I screwed up. So by now, you know, I have 3 kids. You know, my wife and I are still doing quite well. You know, we bought a new house. Sure, there were negative consequences building, but I could always move past them. And I always, if anything, I thought I overdid it, or maybe I chose, you know, probably by my 30s, I started wondering about the pain pills and started to notice that this was a problem. It was the first time I felt addicted to a substance, these painkillers. And I really had no way out. I always would tell myself that I would slow my use, and I could slow down, but I could never quit. So again, now I'm selling Percocets, I'm selling cocaine, I'm still drinking, but I'm still progressing in my career, you know. And by now I'm running jobs most of the time. I'm doing a lot of the wind farms in Ontario. And I do remember, you know, the transitioning from, you know, from alcohol was starting to, you know, drink less and do more of the drugs. And what I remember, one thing happening, and this is kind of the normalizing of it all, getting, you know, celebrating, nothing wrong with the celebrating, the 100th offload at a wind farm in Godrich. And, you know, I'm celebrating with my coworkers, like there's 140 turbines to offload. We've got to 100. We've done it safely. We've done it effectively and productively. We're having some chicken wings and some beers and some good times after work with the truck drivers, the people hauling the wind turbines. And I remember getting pulled over on the way home in the company work truck because I was swerving. And it's probably worth noting, like, what I was doing by now, and this may have saved me, when I left, the local restaurant bar that night, I stopped at Tim Hortons to get a coffee, and I stopped at uh, McDonald's to get a burger, make it look like well, I had a place to go in case I got pulled over. And this is a lot of things that happen um, for the addicted person. Like we're always thinking and using so much energy trying to plan ahead for the worst case scenario, or plan ahead for where we're going to get more. We're living it's like a double life by now. I'm trying to hide the money I'm spending. Wondering if I'm working out of town a little bit, wondering if I got enough to get me through, the stay out of town. And then there's just the worrying and the concern and the dishonest living just never stops. Making excuses up just in case you have to use them, like so much energy and time being wasted. Most times we didn't need them, but that time I was let go, and I remember making the conscious decision, like no more drinking. If I lose my license, I'm out of here. So I didn't really notice too much about being an addict really until probably about 35, 36 years old, the last few years, where all of a sudden trying to keep up with my addiction, like I just kind of started talking about where I was going to get more. Just like every other substance I used, just it seemed like I stopped using it as it didn't do its trick anymore. And I always used to dominate my feelings and feel good. I didn't use because I had like a depression or an anxiety. It was just always to dominate and not deal with life on life's terms, and to feel good. So things really started to fall off, and I'll just touch on like hitting bottom. Like I was just living a total double life, working out of town. My kids got older. Now I'm not coaching anymore, so I'm not really giving back to the community. I'm just mostly working and living on. All I had good left was working. So by now my wife's left me a couple of times. She's found out I got a prescription for painkillers, because I kept that a secret, of course. And it was time to, I lived with my parents for a bit. It was time to get off the painkillers. And I tried, this was my one time trying really on my own to quit using, but it never dawned on me to quit using all substances. It only dawned on me to quit using, like I thought I chose the wrong drug. I still didn't know what an addict was. I thought I chose an addictive drug. So I quit those for a very brief period of time, and then I got myself back in the house at home, and I was still working this whole time. But then I went and filled another prescription, and my wife found it. So this was kind of the beginning, of the hitting bottom. And by by my 40th birthday, I was working out of town, still running jobs, still pointing at, truly I can't be an addict if I can run jobs and I can have a home. But it was, the writing was on the wall, and my wife was fed up, and I chose drugs again. I came home for the Christmas holidays, and I switched substances. So what brought me down was I switched to the substance crystal meth, and I used that every day for 8 months until I finally got walked off the job. And when I got walked off the job and I had to come home early from a company that I'd been working for years, I knew I had to get some help, but not before trying to quit on my own again, and I just couldn't do it. And the worst turned to worse, and things just kept going, spiraling out of control, until finally I was given the ultimatum by my wife. I've got no job anymore. I'm running out of money. She's found the drugs that I'm using. She's figured out I'm using, methamphetamine, and I just had no way out. So what I did have was some money saved up, and I was given the ultimatum to go get help by my wife, or go to detox. And even then, I chose to keep on using, right? And I went hard for another few more weeks, and then until there was almost nothing left to live for. And eventually, my wife had to call the police on me. She had me arrested. Things got really dark for me before I was willing to look at my life and start taking responsibility. So I called the De Novo Treatment Center with the help from my BA, Jay Rowe. And I went to treatment for 35 days. And in that treatment center, I really, for the first time ever, stopped using substance from the time I was 15 years old for more than a few days. I got to about 10 or 12 days, and I started to recognize myself from the inside out for the first time in probably 25 years. And it was appealing. I really liked it. I had to go through, to do a clearing of the past. I had to start learning some new coping skills, learning how to talk about my things from childhood all the way through all the pain and turmoil I caused through addiction. And I came out 35 days a lot happier and very hopeful that I could live this new way of life. However, I didn't realize that's like getting clean, getting sober. I didn't realize how I had to come home and keep using the tools and gaining more experience with this new life of recovery in order to sustain it. So I tried that drug one more time, and I used for 7 more months, where everything just got even darker than before I had to go to treatment. Unfortunate for me, I did make my way back 7 months later to that treatment center, where since that day I've never touched another substance. So what I learned about having to get clean, and what started happening for me in that treatment center, was I just started to get back to basics. I got to slow down and breathe and go outside in nature and just get back to the natural way of living again. I started living and learning about the 12 steps and the 12 principles of recovery. And what I really learned was the 12 principles of recovery really came through first. So what that is 3 of them that we call indispensable are honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. So I'd get honest and just ask for help and tell all, just get totally honest and learn how to be honest. And then I had to learn how to be open-minded to a new way of living. And I just had to be willing to do whatever it took to not ever pick up that first substance again. Because as soon as I pick one up, I don't stop. Like, one is just too many for me. And in doing that, I worked my way through the 12 steps. I came home from de novo the second time. This time my wife was, there were separation papers. I had to swallow the truth that we might no longer be together. I had to live with my grandfather, and I had to start going to 12-step meetings on a regular basis. I had to get a sponsor. I had to work those steps. And in doing that, I've come, full circle where I do that for others now. So just to keep with the timeline, so I call it living the good life now. I haven't had to touch a substance. I haven't had an urge to touch a substance in nearly 7 years. I still go to my home group of Narcotics Anonymous every Friday. I have 4 sponsees. I still talk to my sponsor. I'm with my wife again. I play hockey and baseball like I stopped doing back in the 9th grade. I run to stay healthy and to clear my mind. I've ran a couple marathons over the past few years. So I've learned to live this new way of life, substance free. And what I really learned is, the recovery is an inside job, and it's really been a hidden gift to take my mess and my pain through addiction, all the pain that I've caused everyone, and then turn it around into a message of hope, and the ability to just share my story and share honestly and tell others how it was for me using and how it is for me in recovery. So today I'm a iron worker, supervisor. I got all my family in my life. I love to read books. I'm a yoga instructor. Who would have thought an iron worker that becomes a Kundalini yoga instructor? And I'm just an open book. And probably the greatest gift, that the recovery's given me is to be able to live a 100% honest life. I no longer have to worry about telling anybody anything about me. And at the root of my addiction, and I'll end here, I know I have to wrap it up. What I found was that I had a lot of unconscious guilt and shame, and a lot of fear. If I told people what I was really thinking and what I was really using to hide these feelings, they would surely reject me, abandon me, and leave me. But what really happened was when I admitted those things, but what I did first was I pretty much made the people around me feel all those things, rejected, abandoned, and left behind, because I wouldn't trust them in the first place. But What happened was, by getting vulnerable and getting honest, everyone from my local union to my wife, to my parents, to my friends, to myself, I've gotten closer. So getting vulnerable, getting honest, it's created, learning how to communicate. It's just created a life that is really, really worth living. I wake up today just full of joy and happiness and zest for life, really. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron St. Clair, who I would just like to thank for all the help that he's given me over the years.
Thanks, Rob. Hearing your story never gets old, I can tell you that much. And thank you to Kevin for the introduction as well. So what I'd like to do is just go through a few slides here around who we are as an agency, what we do, and what we're currently doing to try to help address some of the concerns that we're seeing specifically in the industry around addiction and suicide. So for those of you that don't know, DeNovo is an accredited drug and alcohol treatment service, and we work primarily, it's a partnership between the employers or management and the unions in Ontario. And so what our service does is we provide residential drug and alcohol treatment for the workers, the employers, and their families, specifically immediate families, so anyone who would be considered a dependent. And DeNovo actually means a new beginning. We have a board of directors made up of 18 folks, all representing either the employer associations or the union associations, and they're a governance model board. And DeNovo, like I said, is accredited. So just to explain that a little bit further, we're accredited through the Canadian Centre for Accreditation. And this provides a third-party review on our programs and services just to ensure that we are following best practices and that our standards are as high as they need to be or can be. In the early 1990s is when the DeNovo initiative started, and it was actually spearheaded by UA Local 46 out of Toronto. And there were a number of unions that came on board with that, specifically EPSCA, Local 128, and the Mechanical Contractors Association of Toronto. And the reason for that was because it was identified that there were a number of folks who were struggling, and the trades being the trades wanted to be able to look after their members. And so that started out as a base to start offering referrals for folks to treatment centers that were available until 2002, when they were able to open their own facility in Sundridge, and that's the top picture there. And in 2018, we were starting to outgrow that facility, and so we then moved to the facility on the lower half there, increasing capacity from 21 to 50, and we could increase it beyond that if we had to. Also going co-ed, and within the time that DeNovo opened in Sundridge, we've been able to serve over 6,000 folks, which is pretty incredible. The funding model is unique in itself in that the folks that are considered to be participating in the DeNovo plan are contributing 2 cents for every hour worked by the member, and matching that is the employer side. And what that does is it removes any kind of admission fees for folks seeking treatment, and generally speaking, offering a service, a life-saving service, without wait times. The core of our program is the Minnesota model, and we, obviously we use other proven treatment modalities like the stages of change, cognitive behavioral therapy, harm reduction, and motivational interviewing, all within a 35-day residential treatment program. Our educational content is presented through group sessions, anywhere between 28 and 33 hours per week. focusing on a number of different mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health-related topics. And like Rob was saying, the 12-step program is also a part of what we deliver here. 12-step meetings in the evenings and that sort of thing, along with individual counseling sessions every week. And if required, we do have access to a family physician once a week just to help folks coming in get seen or have different ailments looked after while they're in treatment, along with psychiatry supports if needed, although we're not considered to be medical or a mental health treatment facility. We offer aftercare programming and family program. Both of these are available to the clients of DeNovo. Specifically, aftercare follows the residential program to offer ongoing maintenance and support to people that have been through the treatment facility. Anywhere from 12 weeks of programming to 1 year of follow-up phone calls. And the family program is there to support the loved ones of the people who are struggling with addiction so that they can get the support that they need to be well. Just a little bit about the admission process. It's pretty simple in comparison to some facilities. What we require is the individual who's seeking treatment contacts us through our 1-800 number, and we complete a 20 to 30 minute screening with them over the phone just to gather information and determine suitability. The next steps would be either number 2 or number 3 in whatever order. The business representative or the employer association would then offer DeNovo, the approval or the clearance that they're a member in good standing, and then they can access our supports. And the other piece is a medical clearance that is found in our information package, which provides written documentation from a medical practitioner that is clearing the person for treatment. Over the course of the years, DeNovo's been around for having its own facility for 20 years. We found a need to do some research, and over the last few years, there were a lot of questions coming towards us around what's going on in the construction industry. There's a lot of high rates for addiction and suicide, opioid-related deaths, that sort of thing. And so, as you can see on the screen here, in the US, suicide is 3 times the national average in the construction industry, and nearly 1/3 of all opioid-related deaths in Ontario among those employed were from the construction sector. And so we wondered if we were to do a research project and try and determine what the drivers are behind addiction and suicide in the trades, it would be great if we could offer some resources and tools to help address some of those concerns. And so that's what we did. We conducted a research project which was funded by the Ministry of Labor Training and Skills Development Fund in 2021. We surveyed over 1,200 folks from the construction sector, making up membership, leadership, clients, and that. So through this process, we've discovered the top 5 drivers behind addiction and suicide, and the number 1 issue was work habits and schedule. So 44 to 49% of respondents agreed that physical pain due to the kind of work, the long working hours, those were highlighted concerns for some of the opioid addictions, especially with pain management, trying to stay awake for long hours. And then of course what happens there is that energy levels, sleeping patterns, and healthy living are somewhat compromised or at least negatively impacted. The next driver was personal relations. And so a number of the folks were saying that, working away from home or working out of town, that sort of thing, it really infringes on the ability to have relationships with families and friends and maintain those relationships. And it creates a lot of strain on the family unit. The third driver was stress, anxiety, and depression. And of course, a lot of these drivers are interconnected in that, work-related stress The depression and hopelessness is also associated to personal relations in that, sometimes they're working in isolation if they're living out of a hotel room, not surrounded by their loved ones, feeling anxious or restless. And typically what we find is that in a male-dominated industry, a lot of men don't want to talk about other issues that are going on for them, specifically anxiety and depression. And so that is an undiagnosed concern that we've been seeing on a higher level. And of course, the stress in that can also be built in by financial, personal relations, or bullying, things like that. The fourth driver is finances. Some folks identified, financial security was an issue because, you could work for 6 months at this really great job, but then you might get laid off and you don't know what's coming next. Paying bills and accepting jobs for the sake of having a job, which again might be out of town or somewhere where they don't necessarily want to be. The fifth driver was discrimination and abuse. And so bullying by other members or leaders, getting physically, verbally, or mentally abused on the job site was common, up to 26% of respondents. Being of a different racial or ethnic background, and being of the LGBTQ population, or just being a woman in a male-dominated industry. These are all the 5 drivers of addiction and suicide in the trades. So one of the other concerns that we found was that one of the biggest barriers to folks accessing supports was that they were afraid of judgment or ridicule, and so that prevented them from reaching out. So if we were to look at stigma as being one of the biggest factors we need to address, and specifically stigma within the construction sector, we have to understand a few things. And the first thing is that 50% of people experiencing an addiction are saying that that is the main reason they don't reach out for help. That is a large number of people. There are 3 types of stigma. There is self-stigma, which we do to ourselves. I'm not worth it. I don't deserve, any kind of support. I'm a bad person. I'm an addict. No one will love me or help me. Social stigma is what we see when, society develops opinions around people and treats them accordingly. Structural stigma is something that you might see, an addict or an alcoholic might go to emerge seeking legitimate need for treatment. And structural stigma is around how maybe that hospital institution might treat that individual because they see an addict and not an individual who needs help. So what we need to do is to reflect on our views, how we communicate about folks that are struggling with mental health and addictions, and start putting the person first. Once we do that, it'll inevitably grant permission for those struggling with addiction and mental health to seek support. And that's what we need in order to build a healthy workforce and to look after the folks that need it. One of the other things, what I believe, is a lack of education, and so just some simple understanding around why people go through what they go through. Rob did a really good job at explaining sort of, the journey lifeline of what he had to go through and why he got into substance use. And if we were to use an example here, it doesn't have to be someone who has trauma from childhood. It could be something new at the age of 40. Maybe they lost their wife and at the same time they lost their job, or there's just a number of things going on for them. And so what happens is there's the emotional trigger or the event. They have an inability to cope with whatever that is. And so then they use to addictive activity in order to find that temporary relief. The unfortunate piece to that is that after the relief is over, there's often guilt, shame, remorse that follows. And so when folks find themselves in this cycle, the regret, guilt, and shame, or the damage that's been caused from the addictive use, ends up throwing them back into emotional trigger, inability to cope, addictive activity, and so on, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So a couple of things here. Mental health refers to a state of well-being, anywhere from emotions, feelings, connections, and thoughts. And mental illness is something that refers to a specific disorder. And, I find more and more people are talking about mental health and addictions now, especially post-pandemic, because if you haven't, you will experience it at some point in your life. And through the pandemic, I don't know anyone that I've spoken to who did not feel some type of issue with their mental health over the last couple of years. And so just a couple of stats there. By the time Canadians reach the age of 40, 1 in 2 have or will have had a mental illness. And people with mental illness are twice as likely to have a substance use problem compared to the general population. And so if we're looking at that information, it really speaks to that mental health and addiction, it really all comes down to health. And so where we start is with workplace education. We have to be able to provide a culture, a space where people feel comfortable to reach out for support if they need to. And the fear of losing a job because you're struggling with something and don't know how to get out of that hole is really toxic for the individual. And De Novo being De Novo, we're there, and we've been here for over 20 years, like I said. So this picture here is a slide, a work site of one of our union locals, UA 46, in March of 2021 as a part of an initiative to address Mental Health Week. Some of them put "You are no longer alone" on the side of their facilities. So at that time, we were starting a research project, and we found this to be so inspiring that we wanted to use this as a part of a somewhat, sort of a movement in some ways in the industry to inspire the change around, we need to be here to support each other. And so what we've done with this research project is we've developed a 28-minute documentary film, and it includes individuals. Rob is one of our stars. And so what it does is it includes a number of people from leadership to people that have lived experience in recovery, and some professionals providing education. And the intent of the video is to increase knowledge and reduce stigma. And it's free to the construction industry, anyone who wants to watch it. We've got a number of folks who are using it in their training programs, at their apprenticeship colleges, conferences, conventions, and we encourage that. And it can be found on youarenolongeralone.com with other resources as well. I'm just going to show a 2-minute clip, just the trailer for the video. So with that, we've got other research projects on the go. And thank you very much.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough. And, you know, the power of what you have to say and the ability to get people the opportunity to truly save their lives and live you know, Rob, hearing you say, you know, I wake up excited about life. I think that's the mission that everybody that takes a breath seeks every day. So that is sensational. With that, and thank you guys very, very much. You know, we, like I said earlier, we heard both Rob and Aaron last summer in Huntsville, Ontario, and thank you, General Vice President Brian Ten, for bringing them into the mix up there. All the Canadian leadership was there, contractors were there, and just really, you know, I said that moment, if we get the opportunity, if we're fortunate enough to get these guys on a webinar, we're going to do that. So there are people, I can't say that they're really questions, but if you don't mind, I'll read through these comments. This one's from Kent McDonald. He said, hey, Rob, my story is very close to yours. Changed the name and the locations, and we live the same path. 16 years sober and loving life. Thank you for sharing. And Brian Roden said, thank you for sharing. I've had so many iron workers that have worked for us that have addiction problems, and especially my nephew, whose story is so similar to yours, and I know needs help. He's with another erector now because, like you said, he can go away and not face his problems. Jason Lindsay says, thank you for sharing, Rob, and thank you for mentioning the 12 steps, sponsorship, and having a home group. All are the solid foundation that have universal program to reach the higher point of freedom. Wendy Trimdulac says, thanks for sharing your experience, Rob. Also have a very similar story as yours. Your journey is an inspiration. Keep up the good work, brother. Prayers. Philip Holiday says, Rob, thank you for sharing your story. Your influence and impact on others will be part of your legacy. That's very powerful. Kevin says, thanks for sharing your story, Rob. The most important number in my life is my sobriety date, April 12th, 1999. We can be sober iron workers and, quote, our experience can benefit others, and a quote, exclamation point. And Rob says, thank you everyone for being here. Anyone who'd like to talk more, I found the 20-minute time crunch challenging to share in great detail. He gives his cell phone number, Rob. I'll leave that to you to hand it out. And Paul Moreno says, Rob, thank you for sharing your experience, strength and hope, one day at a time. And his sobriety date is May 13th, 2005. Rob adds his March 23, 2016. Jim Corbett says, keep going, it works. God bless and thank you for sharing. And Rich Z says, thanks for sharing, Rob. 20 years sober myself. We have very similar stories, just another sober iron worker. Incredible. Aaron, your closing word, and then we'll give the last word to Rob.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to present. This has been great. Rob and I have done this together a couple of times now, and I love it. This is great. This is why I do what I do. But we're here to support as much as we can, and we need to make sure people aren't afraid to reach out when they need to. Thanks, Kevin, for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. Two quick adds to the question and answer. Jason Gallia says, thanks for your share. I started my journey November 21, 2021, and I keep coming back. Keep going, Jason. And Kent shares his email, kmcdonald@ironworkers765.com. That's KMACDONALD@ironworkers765.com. Anyone can email me if you need help or to talk. Powerful. Rob, the last word is yours.
Thanks to Impact and to you, Kevin, and for everyone who is here to hear the stories tonight, and for everyone who's in recovery. It really is, the receiving really is in the giving, and that's why they're on here. Just like be able to make, be the message out of our own mess is what we really want to do. Like at the core of my being, when I feel best, I'm helping others. That escaped me for a long time, and I'm just happy to have that opportunity to do that each and every day today. Thank you so much.
Rob, what's the best way to approach someone going through this? There's an anonymous question, and the person says they've been through reasonable suspicion training. He says, what's the best way to approach someone going through this? It's a great question.
It's a great question with a really tough answer, because the person, it's almost, for me, it was hearing somebody like me speak, because then I could see myself in them. But if I had to approach someone who I wanted to help, it would have to be to create a safe place without judgment. It's just the nature of someone in that position is to be defensive, and they really just have to feel like they can let their guard down, and hopefully they'll just have a moment of honesty, because it starts right there. As soon as you can make an admission that you need help, the rest, it gets easier from there.
Great answer. Well, I want to wish you guys, whatever your beliefs, sober, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, sober, Happy New Year. Thank you for sharing. It takes incredible courage to do what you guys do, to help people and to share your story, Rob. And very honored to just be the tee that you guys teed up for you guys. And Impact is not Kevin Hilton. It is the 4,000 ironworking contractors and the 130,000 iron workers that are there to help other people. I'm going to close this real quick on a soapbox. You hear a lot about unions. A lot of it's negative, but I don't know how many people picked up that when Rob needed help the most, in a desperate situation, he went to J. Rowe, his business manager. And what we do is right and just, and thank you again. You got everybody out there. We'll see you in New Orleans, February 12th through the 15th, where we have recovery meetings every day. And be well, have great holidays, and we'll see you in the new year. Take care, you guys.
Thank you.